It began with silence and eerie quiet that settled over the Polish countryside in the pre-dawn hours of September 1939. Moments later, the skies roared with the sound of German bombers, and the earth trembled as tanks crossed the border. In the blink of an eye, the world shifted. What followed was not just a war of nations, but a war of ideologies, survival, and unimaginable scale. A war that reshaped borders, rewrote rules, and redrew the very concept of good and evil. But what if I told you World War II wasn't inevitable? That it was born not just from ambition or hatred, but from a chain of miscalculations, broken promises, and one man's obsession with vengeance? Let's rewind a little. The Treaty of Versailles in 1919 was meant to ensure peace after the First World War. Instead, it planted the seeds for another. Germany was crippled economically, militarily, and psychologically. Humiliated and burdened with impossible reparations. The Weimar Republic was a ghost state, starving, fragmented, and angry. And in that chaos, a failed artist with a messianic complex found his stage. Adolf Hitler didn't rise overnight. He clawed his way into power with fiery speeches, false promises, and a masterful manipulation of fear. He promised to make Germany great again. Sound familiar? By 1933, he was chancellor. By 1934, dictator. He remilitarized the Rhineland, annexed Austria, swallowed Czechoslovakia, and the world blinked. Britain and France, still traumatized by the trenches of World War I, chose appeasement over confrontation. It was a gamble, and they lost. Germany invaded Poland, and finally, Britain and France declared war. But it was too late. The Blitzkrieg Lightning War was unlike anything the world had seen. Fast, ruthless, and precise. Poland fell in weeks. France, once the might of Europe, collapsed in 6. The Nazis paraded through Paris as the Eiffel Tower loomed helplessly above. And then came the Battle of Britain. Hitler believed air superiority would break the British spirit. What he didn't count on was the resolve of a nation and a small group of pilots known as the Few. They flew outdated Spitfires and Hurricanes, outnumbered and exhausted, but they fought like demons. London burned. Families slept in subways. But Britain did not fall. Meanwhile, in the East, a secret deal had been struck, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Stalin and Hitler, sworn ideologues, had agreed to divide Eastern Europe like slices of bread. But in 1941, Hitler betrayed Stalin with Operation Barbarossa, largest land invasion in history. Over 3 million German soldiers stormed the Soviet Union. Cities like Kiev and Leningrad were besieged. But again, resistance was fierce. Soviet citizens fought with whatever they had: shovels, kitchen knives, their bare hands, and then Pearl Harbor.
December 7, 1941. The Japanese Empire launched a surprise attack on the U.S. Pacific Fleet. In under 2 hours, thousands were dead. Battleships capsized. The sleeping giant awoke. The United States, previously neutral, entered the war and everything changed. This was no longer a European war. It was global. In the Pacific, Japan had already conquered vast swaths of territory. China, the Philippines, Malaysia. Their vision? A Japanese-led Asia free of Western influence. But behind that slogan lay massacres, forced labor, and unspeakable cruelty. The rape of Nanking, where over 300 civilians were slaughtered, remains one of the most haunting atrocities in human history. Back in Europe, the war's darkest secret was unfolding. The Holocaust wasn't just mass murder, it was industrial genocide. Gas chambers, death camps, entire families vanished. 6 million Jews, and millions more Roma, disabled, LGBTQ, political dissidents systematically exterminated. The world would later ask how such evil could go unnoticed. But the truth? Many did notice. They just didn't act. By 1942, the tide was beginning to turn. At Stalingrad, Soviet forces encircled and destroyed an entire German army. It was brutal close combat, starvation, snipers picking off soldiers in the snow. One Soviet soldier recalled, "We were knee-deep in death, but we held." In North Africa, General Montgomery clashed with the Desert Fox, Erwin Rommel. At El Alamein, the British finally halted the German advance, and in the Pacific, the US Navy stunned Japan at Midway, sinking 4 aircraft carriers in a single battle. The Japanese would never fully recover. From there, the Allies began their push. Italy was invaded. Mussolini was overthrown, hanged by his own people. The Normandy landings day saw 156 Allied troops storm the beaches of France on June 6, 1944. It was the largest amphibious assault in history. Soldiers drowned under heavy gear. Machine guns tore through the surf, but they broke through. Germany was collapsing. The Allies advanced from the west, the Soviets from the east. Berlin was surrounded. In April 1945, Hitler, refusing to face capture, shot himself in a bunker. Days later, Germany surrendered. But the war wasn't over. In the Pacific, Japan refused to yield. The Americans launched firebombing raids. Tokyo was reduced to ashes. Yet surrender was not forthcoming. Then came August 6, 1945. A single bomber dropped a device called Little Boy over Hiroshima. In an instant, the city became a mushroom cloud. 3 days later, Nagasaki, over 200 lives lost. The world had entered the atomic age. Japan surrendered. World War II was finally over, but peace came with a price. 75 million people had perished. Cities lay in ruins. Empires crumbled. From the ashes rose new powers. The United States and the Soviet Union ushering in the Cold War. The United Nations was born in the hope of never repeating such catastrophe, and the world was forced to confront what it had allowed to happen in the shadows of war. Yet, for all its horrors, World War II was also a story of humanity's endurance, of resistance fighters who sabotaged enemy trains in the dead of night, of codebreakers at Bletchley Park who deciphered Nazi messages and shortened the war, of nurses who treated the wounded under fire, and families who risked everything to hide those being hunted. It was a war that proved how fragile civilization can be, and how powerful ordinary people can become when forced to stand against tyranny. We remember it not because we glorify it, but because forgetting is far more dangerous. And as long as its lessons are remembered, maybe, just maybe, we'll never see its like again.